I myself am strange and unusual.
Did you know that Winona Ryder was once considered the face of 90s Hollywood? She worked with Scorsese, Coppola, Burton, and Gilliam. She was Oscar nominated, a red carpet icon, and starred in some of the most beloved cult classics of her generation, from Beetlejuice and Heathers to Edward Scissorhands and Girl Interrupted. Then, seemingly overnight, it all came crashing down. A shoplifting scandal, media ridicule, and years of silence. For almost a decade, she disappeared from the spotlight, leaving fans wondering what the hell happened. And then, just when Hollywood had all but written her off, she came roaring back. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a cultural resurrection. This is the rise, fall, and return of Winona Ryder, a Halloween icon, a 90s legend, and one of the most quietly fascinating figures in modern pop culture. Let's fade to black. Winona Laura Horowitz was born on October 29, 1971, just 2 days before Halloween, in Winona, Minnesota, the town she was later named after. Her upbringing was anything but typical. Her parents were deeply embedded in the counterculture scene. Her father, Michael Horowitz, was an author and archivist who worked closely with Timothy Leary, and her mother, Cynthia Palmer, was a writer and video producer. In 1978, the family moved to a commune in Northern California with no electricity or TV. Winona grew up surrounded by books, beat poets, and a deep love for outsider art. At age 12, after the family relocated to Petaluma, she enrolled in acting classes at the American Conservatory Theatre in San Francisco. She quickly showed talent, but also stood out in more ways than one. She was small, intense, and leaned into a goth aesthetic before it was fashionable. Her classmates bullied her for the way she dressed, but instead of retreating, she doubled down on her uniqueness. In 1986, she made her film debut in Lucas opposite Corey Haim, but her breakout came 2 years later when she was cast as Lydia Dietz in Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. With her pale complexion, black clothes, and dry delivery, Lydia was the ultimate goth outsider, and Winona owned the role. Almost overnight, she caught the interest of everyone. That same year, she starred in Heathers, a pitch-black teen comedy that was too weird for the mainstream at the time, but became a defining film for a generation. Winona Ryder wasn't just another teen actress, she was the face of a new kind of misfit cool. By the early 1990s, Winona Ryder wasn't just a cult star, she was one of the most in-demand actresses in Hollywood. Her unique blend of intelligence, vulnerability, and offbeat charisma made her stand out in a sea of conventional leading ladies. And it wasn't just teen fare anymore. She was working with some of the biggest directors in the business. In 1990, she reunited with Tim Burton for Edward Scissorhands, playing opposite Johnny Depp, her real-life boyfriend at the time. The two became one of the most talked-about couples of the era, and the film was a huge critical and commercial success. That same year, she starred in Mermaids alongside Cher, showing she could handle quirky comedy and dramatic depth. Then came the prestige phase. In 1993, she earned her first Oscar nomination for Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, followed by a second for her performance as Jo March in Little Women the very next year. She was also the face of Reality Bites, a defining film of the Gen X era, and starred in Bram Stoker's Dracula for Francis Ford Coppola, further solidifying her status as both a box office draw and a critical darling. By 1995, she was on magazine covers, fashion runways, and award show stages. But unlike many stars of the time, she didn't seem to chase it. If anything, she remained something of an enigma. And then there was Alien Resurrection in 1997. Now, this one was a weird one, especially for fans of the Alien franchise. I was a huge fan of those first two films. I mean, you couldn't find a bigger fan. And this sequel took the series into a tone I really didn't enjoy. It was campy, over-stylized, and tonally all over the place. Winona played Anna Lee Cole, an android tech specialist opposite Sigourney Weaver, and to be honest, I just thought she was really miscast. She's a great actress, there's no question, but she just didn't feel like a natural fit in that universe. The film itself divided critics and audiences, and while it didn't derail her career, it definitely felt like an awkward detour during a period where her roles had otherwise been so carefully chosen. Winona wasn't just a star, she was a symbol of independence, of outsider energy, but while she seemed untouchable at the time, things were about to change. At the turn of the millennium, Winona Ryder's carefully guarded mystique began to crack. Not because of a string of bad movies or a public meltdown, but something far more mundane and far more damaging. In December 2001, Ryder was arrested for shoplifting over $5,000 worth of merchandise from Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. Surveillance footage, mugshots, and media frenzy followed almost instantly. Tabloids had a field day. The arrest became national news, not just because it was unexpected, but because it seemed so off-brand for someone so seemingly composed and private as Winona Ryder. During the trial, details emerged that painted a more complicated picture. Struggles with anxiety, prescription medication, and burnout. She was found guilty of grand theft and vandalism, though she avoided jail time, but the damage was done, not just to her image, but to her momentum. Hollywood didn't cancel her in a modern sense, but the offers slowed to a trickle. The studios, once eager to work with her, quietly closed their doors. And just like that, Winona Ryder, one of the defining stars of the 90s, was no longer anywhere to be seen. No major roles, no interviews, no press. For the better part of a decade, she disappeared from the spotlight almost entirely. Whether it was a personal choice or the result of quiet industry exile, one thing was clear. The golden girl of indie Hollywood had gone dark, and fans were left wondering if they'd ever see her again. Although Winona Ryder had vanished from the Hollywood A-list, she never entirely disappeared. In the years following her arrest, she kept working quietly, sporadically, and almost entirely under the radar. In 2006, she voiced a character in Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly, a rotoscope sci-fi mindbender starring Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr. It wasn't a hit, but it reminded critics that she could still hold her own in complex, offbeat material. She took on small roles in indie films like the Darwin Awards, Sex and Death 101, and The 10. Some of these were forgettable, but others hinted at a version of Winona that was still very much alive, playful, ironic, and self-aware. And while Hollywood had moved on, her fans hadn't. If anything, her cult following only grew stronger. On early blogs, forums, and eventually Tumblr, gifs of Heathers and Beetlejuice exploded in popularity. Her 90s aesthetic became a touchstone for an entire wave of nostalgic revivalism. She was still showing up in odd places too. In 2009 Star Trek, she played Spock's mother, a small but surprising casting choice that had people whispering, "Wait, was that Winona Ryder?" It wasn't a return, not yet, but it was the beginning of a slow, strange re-entry, one that would pay off in ways no one saw coming. In 2016, something unexpected happened. A new Netflix series called Stranger Things dropped with little fanfare, a retro sci-fi horror throwback with a cast of unknown kids, 80s references, and Winona Ryder. For younger viewers, it was probably their first time seeing her, but for long-time fans, it felt like a resurrection. Ryder played Joyce Byers, a frantic, grieving mother whose son mysteriously vanishes in the first episode, and from the very beginning, she was electric. Raw, vulnerable, slightly unhinged, it was a role that allowed her to tap into all the things she'd always done best. Emotional intensity, offbeat energy, and complete sincerity. What could have easily been a campy genre performance became one of the show's most grounded and human elements. Her performance gave the show a raw human centre, something real to hold on to amidst all the supernatural chaos. Critics were as surprised as audiences. Suddenly, the same woman who'd been all but erased from Hollywood conversations was front and centre in one of the biggest pop culture phenomena of the decade. And she didn't just survive the comeback, she thrived in it. Stranger Things didn't just put her back on the map, it reframed her entirely. She wasn't a relic of the 90s, it was more than just a comeback, it was redemption, and for Winona Ryder, it proved that no matter how long you're away, the right role can bring you home. And in 2024, she finally returned to the big screen with Beetlejuice 2. On paper, it should have been a major moment. Lydia Dietz back in cinemas after decades away, in the sequel to the film that made her a cult icon. But to be honest, I had a feeling this one was going to tank, and unfortunately, it kind of did. It wasn't that she was poor in the role, she did exactly what she was meant to do, essentially reprising Lydia with that same dry, deadpan delivery, but the film itself just fell flat. Too many characters, too many half-baked ideas, and not enough of what made the original work in the first place. It felt like a missed opportunity. Not a disaster, but definitely not the triumphant return it could have been. Still, the fact that Beetlejuice 2 happened at all speaks to her lasting cultural weight, even if the film didn't hit. The idea of Ryder returning to that world clearly meant something to people. Winona Ryder's influence goes far beyond her filmography. She's more than just a 90s icon. She's a cultural touchstone, a symbol of the outsider, the misfit, the vulnerable girl who somehow made weird cool. Her fashion sense, once mocked for being too goth or too vintage, has become the blueprint for entire generations of alternative style. From red carpet thrift store looks to her minimalist, androgynous 90s aesthetic, Winona's influence can be seen everywhere, Pinterest boards and TikTok trend cycles. But her legacy doesn't endure because of nostalgia, it endures because of what she survived. One very public mistake, whether it was a cry for help, emotional exhaustion or simply burnout, brought her career to a sudden stop. She's never fully explained what drove her to do it, but in later interviews she's hinted that she was over-medicated, mentally overwhelmed, and that maybe she just needed to pause. She once said, "I must have been at a point where I just wanted to stop." And maybe that's exactly what happened. What followed wasn't a comeback campaign or redemption arc crafted by a publicist. It was a quiet, slow re-entry. A choice to work again, to rebuild, and in doing so she didn't erase the past, she absorbed it. Today she continues to work, primarily in Stranger Things, one of Netflix's flagship series. She doesn't seek spotlight now, but she doesn't hide from it either. And in her personal life she's always kept things relatively private. She's never married, and she doesn't have children. But she's been in a long-term relationship with Scott McKinley Hahn since 2011. She lives in San Francisco, a city that fits her quiet, off-the-grid lifestyle, far from the Hollywood chaos. And after everything, the rise, the fall, the silence, I'm really glad she came out of the other side. Not with a glossy movie comeback or a reinvention campaign, but with a series that feels honest. Stranger Things is drenched in nostalgia, sure, but in a way, so is she. It's finally good to see a Hollywood comeback that actually sticks the landing. From Beetlejuice to Girl Interrupted, from tabloid exile to Stranger Things, she's created a body of work that's emotional, unpredictable, and very her. If you enjoyed this look back at her journey, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments, what's your favourite Winona Ryder role? Thanks for watching, and I really do look forward to seeing you all in the next one.